How was your coffee? All right. I'm curious, those questions that we ask you to explore and think about when you have business development type or conversations with clients that are potential clients. How many of you do preparing with those sorts of questions or other types of things that you think about before you have these conversations? Yeah? Some of you prepare for the conversation? Yeah. Is it useful to do preparing, do you think, and to do some preparation? And were those questions useful to think about? Because one of the things that we know is that lawyers, you're obviously very well prepared when you're working on matters on things, so there's often no stone left unturned. But what I find in these sorts of client conversations that take up a lot of time, often we can skip the preparation, especially when we're really busy. So we really encourage you to do that. And just one thing I want to say before we hand over to Kath is there was a partner that I was working with a few years ago who was very successful in bringing in work, and we talked about these three circles, and we talked about coffee. And one of the things that he said to me was, when I have coffee with clients, the context in a cafe tends to be more conducive to the personal stuff. So I have really good personal type conversations in a cafe, but I find it harder to have more of a, like a conversation about the work and the industry and organisation and so on in a cafe. I'm not sure whether that resonates with any of you, but one of the things that he suggested was, for me, when I want to have a more serious conversation about the work and putting myself forward for it, I'd rather do it in their office. So, you nodding?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it works for you?
If you're going to reel them in, eventually you have to get them where they're comfortable or where you're comfortable. And so you've got to sit in an office, and usually somewhere where they call people in to tell more about the story.
Thank you. So that could be worthy of some thought. One last thing is, show of hands before about who was comfortable with the personal, the industry, organisation, and thanks Kath, and the need and the work. There were a couple of shows of hands around those who were comfortable in talking about the work. I'm just curious about what questions you ask. So if you're cultivating a client relationship and you might be getting to know them, understanding their industry and so on, and you want to then talk about the work, because it often takes a question, 2 or 3 questions to have up your sleeve. We've got one over here.
Yeah, one of the questions that we've often used where we have an established relationship is that you say, when you've got a conflict, can you think of us first? So that you get your foot in the door, if nothing else. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Anyone else have any ideas about questions you ask that help you go there? Sure.
For new clients that we haven't encountered before and come to us through a website or whatever, we often send out a questionnaire before we meet with them, which asks them a lot of questions about their business and sort of sets the framework for our discussion, which facilitates that quite well.
Yeah, okay. Cheers, Joel. I'd really encourage you to think of a couple of sort of standard questions. Or can you tell me about the work that you brief out? Can you tell me about, and that's one that people often use, can you tell me about, just a very open question like that. Kath, yeah.
Okay, so you've done the preparation, you're all ready to go. When we're speaking with people, some people, this might not be you, but find the actual experience of having the coffee a little bit overwhelming at times, and quite know what's going to happen, how will it go, what will I say, will I run out of things to say. So sometimes having a bit of a frame as to how that coffee could track is useful, a bit of a model. So while you're in the middle of it, you can think, oh, where am I at here? Am I in the right spot? Am I moving through at a pace that's going to be useful? So I offer this to you as a way of thinking about it while you're in the coffee. This model is so intuitive, it almost goes without saying, that whenever you're having a conversation, if you can think about 4 steps and consultants love opens and forwards and words with letters, back letters, so I do too. So there's stages where there's an opening stage of any coffee. And, this probably comes naturally to people, it doesn't come naturally to everyone. I'm working with a technical expert, not a lawyer, who finds it extraordinarily difficult to build initial rapport. I've spent a long time with him teaching him about eye contact and about how you shake hands. He's got some tendencies that makes that difficult. So if this is something you nail, that this comes naturally to you, you're already above some people who have to build rapport with other people. So there is a stage where you make eye contact, smile, and build initial rapport with them. It comes naturally. The purpose, to state the purpose for the coffee, I'm grateful to someone who came up to me in the break and told me a story where there was an invitation for a coffee for an existing client where that trust equation had ticks in every one of the four components. There was credibility, there was reliability, it had been demonstrated over a long period of time, and then there was a request for a coffee, and it freaked the client out. We forget that while we've done this preparation to overcome our own objections to coffee, we forget that for some clients, the invitation can be anxiety-provoking in itself. Like, what are they going to ask of me? Why are we having coffee? What do they want? What do they want? So it starts questioning that equation. Is this about them or me? There might be some reluctance. To use the purpose stage to be upfront about why you're requesting the coffee can be a really useful way of either making the invitation or commencing it. So to say, look, I've been working with you for a year. It's great. I think we work really well together, but I just want to chat to you informally over a couple of aspects of your files and your practice, just so I make sure I understand it outside of an office context, and it might be easier if we do it over coffee, but that's sort of the frame. Or I'm really interested in hearing more about your practice, if your strategy is to focus on understanding their business more. I really want to understand your business a bit better, so I wouldn't mind catching up with you for half an hour for a coffee. So to be upfront and transparent about the purpose can help keep the coffee on track, can help you be successful about getting the coffee in the first place, can help keep you on track, because if you have been transparent, it's a whole lot easier to orient yourself to being in the moment and reminding yourself you're there to help keep you focused and them. Yep. The exploration stage is when you are probing for information. You're probing for how they're seeing the world, you're exploring the aspects of their work, their professional lives, their legal needs. It's about them, it's not about you, it's open questions. It's an exploration stage. It's not an exploration where you're focusing on what you can get out of it. So there's a stage, which is probably most of the coffee, where you spend a lot of time listening to them and asking questions about the things that you are interested in their lives. And the next steps, when you finish the coffee, what's going to happen from here? So we've had a lovely coffee. Are you going to actually ask for work? Are you going to say, look, I'll send you an article? What's the next step? Are we going to catch up for another coffee in a couple of months? Are we going to link in with each other? Is it okay if I link in with you? But to be mindful at closing and think about what will happen next, there needs to be an end to it. Does that make sense? It's sort of an intuitive model, but it's useful to, while you're in it, to think, oh, I'm in the exploration stage, I've got to remember to do next steps, not just end here. Where do things go wrong? Done all the prep, got the model, doesn't always go to plan. There's lots of things that can go wrong. We try to think of things that we've seen, or we see in what lawyers experience. And there seem to be three main areas where the intention goes astray. The first one we call the wrong mindset. So this is where, despite your best intentions, you forget to focus on them and their needs and their world, and are distracted by your own needs, your own world. Now, it might not be about business. It might be about a sense of panic in the moment. But you tune into your own internal monologue, and you listen to that, and it starts screaming at you, and you're distracted by that. So it could be a need you might have to provide a solution, to appear like the expert, to demonstrate your credibility, to finish sentences of theirs. Those sort of behaviours that are indicating an interest in yourself and your own comfort rather than them and their comfort. So you're trying to make it easy for them to be in the coffee experience rather than easy for yourself. So the sort of behaviours a client might see from you just to check in would be finishing sentences or jumping in with every silence, telling a lot of war stories. If any barristers in the room, I don't know, if you've ever been with barristers sometimes and you tell about a client, you hear all about their stories. The war stories, a monologue about their own lives. If you find yourself talking more than listening, it might be a sign that you're in the wrong, sorry Paul, there is a barrister in the room, and you're not guilty of this.
I was just before,
the war stories, you've experienced, you know it for yourself when you're with someone who has gone into their own worldview and their own world and they're not interested in you anymore, they've stopped listening. So you've got to keep reorienting yourself back into their world. Anyone who was here at the listening skills or the communication skills last week, we talked about that mindset for listening, that you need to refocus your attention. Yep. So that mindset can undermine you in the moment. So you've got to keep listening to them, refocusing on what's important to them, not to you. Their comfort, not yours. Their needs, not yours. Yep. Discouraged. This is a romance. You don't ask for someone's hand in marriage on the first date. I know I've been working with people who have tried a coffee and it didn't work, so I'm not doing it again. Yeah? We become discouraged because our expectations were just too high. We misjudged the strength of the relationship. We expected too much from one coffee. We overestimated the need for our services. And dare I say it, a lot of lawyers are pessimists. There's been studies that show that even if you don't start as a pessimist, by the end of it you end up like one. And what pessimists do, and I don't know whether you identify with that label, but what pessimists do is, if something goes wrong, this is how it's measured in the studies, if something goes wrong, they would tend to say the cause of that thing going wrong is about me, I caused it, and I did it, the cause is pervasive, so it's personal and pervasive, so it's not just this coffee, it's every coffee and every marketing. Everything I do in marketing is hopeless, and it's permanent. So those three things, it's not just this coffee, it's everything. So when you hear yourself saying everything's and always and shoulds, these are the signs that you're into the world of unhappiness. You need to pull yourself out of there and check in with your own monologue about the cause of it. So the pessimistic tendency some lawyers have to turn in on yourself if things go wrong, kick in at this stage. You've put yourself out there, you're vulnerable, it's gone wrong or it hasn't gone to plan, I'm never doing it again. You give up far too easily. Optimists persevere. Optimists don't assess risks very well, but they do persevere. Pessimists are very good at assessing risks, but they give up too soon. So if you tend to be a pessimist, stick in there a bit. Stick in there longer than you're comfortable. It's a sure sign there's probably something in there that you're giving up too quickly. And check your expectations. It's okay to get it wrong in terms of your expectations. It's gone down, baby. It's okay to get it wrong. So you might have just misjudged it. It doesn't mean you'll misjudge it again. Next time it's information, you're finding out more about the client. So you had a hypothesis and it's been a bit wobbly. That's okay. Next time it'll be different. So don't give up. Failing to follow the plan. It's almost a subset of that first mindset. That you've had a plan, you've done all the preparation, and in the moment you panic. You panic and that little ticket tape of, don't go there, you're using them, you're slimy. It starts shouting at you in the middle of it, so you think, I'm backing off, backing away, and you go back to a rapport building. That's safe, yeah? You don't ask for the work, or you don't go into that circle that you're not as comfortable, you stick to what you're most comfortable, so you don't follow your plan. I said there are two ways to overcome the internal monologue. The first is when you have time and the space to reflect on it, to really question your thinking. That's the foundational CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. It's really wrestling with those thoughts and is there evidence. Sometimes we need time to do that, a lot of awareness, and if you're in the moment, that can be a bit hard to do. So the other way to overcome that internal monologue is a different approach, and it's more of a mindfulness approach. Do you know what I mean by mindfulness? Being in the moment. I find a lot of lawyers like the mindfulness work, where you just bring yourself back into the moment. You feel your feet on the ground and where you are on a seat. You're aware of the chatter in the coffee shop. You're also aware of those thoughts coming through loudly. The monologue's starting to scream at you. You're aware of it. Accept it and refocus. So you don't have to react to whatever thought and feeling you have. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It will pass. You've got a plan here. You stick to the plan. You go back to it. So it's refocusing your attention. Just accept that vulnerability is probably going to be part of it. Those voices, that monologue that you habitually hear, it's going to occur. You can expect it to occur, and it's just showing up as it always will. Accept that it's going to be part of that experience. You don't have to react to it. Yeah. So, any questions about that? Main derailers.
The one around becoming discouraged is interesting. I remember in the 80s, in the mid-80s, there was this theory. It was related to generating work from clients, and there was the rule of 7. And the theory was, like a lot of these things, a theory, I'm not sure how well-rounded it was in practice, but it was, on average, it takes about 7 types of contacts, or 7 different contacts over a period of time to generate a sort of a higher trust relationship. And of course, everyone is different, right? So we all respond differently. But it certainly wasn't 1, and these days it's probably higher than 7, so I think it adds to the point around not becoming discouraged.
Well, that's right. I think someone said to me that the rule of thumb, another rule of thumb, is that from initial contact, a cold contact to client is 2 years. So I don't know whether that's your experience, but when there's a few nods in the room, that it takes a long time. So if you can do it faster than that, great. You might have just got them at the right time, or you might be particularly great at BD, or you might have just done a great job. But generally, it takes 2 years. So if you're in a sweet spot now in your practice, what kind of investment do you need to make for the work to come in 2 years? Yeah.
And to pick up on that point, who's done BD when you've been really quiet? Who's done business development when you've been quiet? Yeah?
There's a smell of death about it.
Yeah, did you hear that? Very uplifting comment, the smell of death. Thank you. But it's awful, isn't it? Yeah. And what's your confidence like when you're really quiet? That's awful. That's awful. So to pick up on that point that Kath made, one of the best things you can do is when you're busy, just try and do a little bit of this. Because people, when they're busy, they tend to focus on the work and nothing else. So even if you can think around, I'll have 1 conversation a week with a potential client, or I'll pick up the phone once a week, or I'll send 1 email a week, or whatever it is, because it's the best time. Because you don't care. You don't care as much about the conversation and whether it goes well. And as a consequence of that, what happens? It goes well.
Yeah, the internal monologue is, I'm a legend.
Okay, so you've had the coffee. Can you picture that? You've met this potential client. How's the conversation gone? Did you get work? Probably not, right? Because we know that it takes about 2 years roughly to generate work from a client. So to pick up on the point around not becoming discouraged, how do you know whether the conversation was a success? How do you test whether it worked? Any thoughts on that? Because this is one of the challenges, I think, is that if we're investing in these relationships, what are we getting back to keep us not getting discouraged? And how do we test and make a call as to whether or not it was worthwhile? Because often, what we want really is we want the client to give us some work, and then we go, yeah, that was a successful coffee, but it doesn't happen very often. So what's your own benchmark of success in a coffee or a catch-up?
You get a response, or a thank you, or you send a follow-up email saying, that was really good, I really enjoyed that, I hope you did too, I'd like to do it again.
Yep.
The response, yes, that'd be fabulous.
Yep.
Why don't we, in fact, they might even go so far as to start to tee up the next catch-up.
Yeah. So like a feel, like a positive positive experience and a positive relationship. One of the other things that can be useful, I reckon, is what do we learn about the client? Because if we did the things that Kath talked about, if we listened, we asked questions, we had conversations in those, or it might have been one of those circles, or 2 of them, or your own circles, or whatever it was, we should have learned something about the client. And so I think one of the tests about this is in the initial conversation, a client might want to tell you much too, because they might not have a level of trust with you where they want to disclose. But after a little while, they will. So one of the tests, I think, one of the tests for a successful conversation is, the positive relationship and a positive level of emotion and wanting to catch up again. But it's, what did I learn about the client? What did I learn about the work they briefed out? What did I learn about what they're interested in so I can invite them to things? What did I learn about some of the things they struggle with so I can help them? And then it's after the conversation, then maybe another conversation where it said something like, you mentioned last time we caught up that you're interested in this particular topic or this type of CLE presentation. We've got one on. So automatically the client thinks, they've got me at heart and that kind of thing. So the follow-up is really important.
Okay, so what are you going to do tomorrow, next week, with what you've heard today? Preparation you've done during this hour, conversations you've had, with the models we've presented. What are you going to do from here? What are your next steps? What will you commit yourself to do? What will you do differently? I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that. This is the last and final time you'll have to share with your partner. What will you be doing next? And the reason for sharing is, one, to cement it in your own mind, because we are more likely to follow through if we send it out there rather than just keep it in. But two, you might motivate them to do something as well. Okay. Then we'll have questions. So work with your partner for a minute, 2 minutes, I'll call you back. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That went fast, didn't it? Are there any questions, comments, reflections, anything you want to share with the group or ask of us or just discuss?
Can I just follow up? Just on a brief conversation I had here, would you also add to whatever's been up on the screen this morning, in whatever you do, you must be true to yourself and who you are. You can't be something which you're not, and therefore if your way is a blunt way, we'll be blunt. If your way is a more subtle way, whatever, but you've got to be yourself in applying the stuff you've learned this morning.
Yes. If you want to demonstrate reliability, that's maintaining your persona over time. So putting on a personality or performance, are you going to be able to sustain that and so demonstrate long-term reliability in the way you're presenting? So yes, you need to be yourself and to have integrity, because you're more likely to follow through if you do have integrity and know that's okay.
I would add to that, Michael, also do what you enjoy. So some people will say, I don't like any of this stuff, but I'm sure there are things that people really enjoy doing in the business development type related area. It's doing what you enjoy, and also to pick up on Kath's point earlier, is play to your strengths. And I think lawyers tend to do this. I work with a lot of different professions, and lawyers don't pick up on their strengths as well as other people do. So I'd be thinking about, where am I really strong in this area? How do I leverage that rather than doing what you don't do well?
Hello, Mark. Following what you just said, I think it goes back to your expertise and your reliability when you put that pyramid in there. Because when you present yourself to a client, you tend to tell them what are you really going to do for them, and your expertise comes out of that way. And you cannot pretend. For example, if you're not really expert in commercial law, and they come to you and they say, oh, all right, what can I do for them? But if in your organization there's other lawyers that are expert on that field, then you refer them to that particular lawyer, and then they are still in the organization, and you can help them. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because one of the things I also see a lot of is this works well. Some people do this really well from their perspective to external clients, but not so well in their firms. You know, so I think this applies equally internally as it does externally. I think that's a really good point.
We're now done, so thank you very much, Kath, and thank you very much, Mark, and please join me in thanking both of them for what was a very interesting presentation. I should say on behalf of Kath and Mark that as you see from your folders, they both have their own consultancy businesses in this area, and therefore if you want to follow up personally and work with Kath or Mark, their contact details are there. And as I say, it's not just me saying to do what I say, I do it myself because we use Kath and Mark with members of our list. That's the end of our CPD series for this year, 2013-14. We'll take a break in April to do some planning for the future, and we'll start again in May. Thanks very much for your attendance.